Hi, good morning. So I wanted to discuss a Gorean topic, and I began wanting to discuss the topic about women and freedom, but really I think it more joins together, so it's easier to talk about the concept of freedom from a Gorean perspective, all in all. So you might ask yourself, why do I, a woman, discuss freedom? Well, because as a free woman, as a Gorean free woman, I get told again and again and again that a man determines whether or not I am free. And I think that's bullshit. Now, before you all go ballistic and toss yourself at the keyboards, hear me out. I think that as Goreans, and since we do assume that freedom is a very important part, perhaps the most important part of being a Gorean, because if you're going to follow the philosophy and have honor, you have to be accountable for your actions. And unless you are free, you cannot be said to be fully accountable for what you do. So now, first of all, when you read the Gore books, you have to keep in mind that they were not written to be the basis of a lifestyle. They were written to be entertainment, and they were written because John Norman were frustrated with the feminist movement. And therefore you will find a lot of, well, for example, in the Gore books, I think you don't have one single, you have some, but for the most part you don't have one single free woman who doesn't at some point in the series become a slave. And yeah, that do sort of color take. And of course in the books it is said that a woman is only free for as long as it pleases a man that she is. Now, the reason why I say that is bullshit is that if your freedom is determined on what other people allow you or do not allow you to be, then you are not free. Then you are a privileged slave. If your freedom is something that others can just come in and take away from you, then you are not free. You are a slave. Now, there will always be, I think there are three concepts in work here as to why that saying isn't useless, but it can't be taken as literal truth that any free woman in the lifestyle is just there ready for the taking. I mean, I have been threatened by Gorean men that they will come to my door and enslave me against my will because I identify as a Gorean, and they feel that as a woman, if any man wants to make me a slave, it's completely his right. Now, first of all, if these people actually read the books, they will find that even on Gore, with as we could say hostile environment to free women as there are, 90% of the female population are free. This is what John Norman has said. 90% of all women on Gore are free. Also, the various city-states have very distinct rules for when a woman, or a man for that matter, can be made a slave and when not. So no, a man cannot just walk up, knock on a woman's door and say, you're my slave, I'm gonna collar you. It doesn't work like that. Now, what is meant is that women on Gore do not have the same rights as men. And in most of the city-states, there are some exceptions, but in most of them, men are the lawgivers. The men are those that write the laws and so on. Therefore, the fate of women very much are up to men. However, A lawgiver doesn't give you your freedom. A lawgiver can give you safety, but it or she doesn't give you freedom. If somebody comes and points a gun at you and says, "You will be my slave or I will shoot you," then you have the choice. Do you value your freedom or your life the more? And in a society like in the Gore books, women more often than men were put into that position. Basically, slavery or death. And here's where the second concept comes in. And that is that women are much more likely to choose slavery than death. And my banks are just not behaving today. And here's why. From the point of nature, we are made to adapt because we need genetic diversity. So very often in the earlier history of mankind, men would kidnap females, marry them, or make them their mates, and so on, and make them part of their tribe, and women adopted. Women have a much greater tendency to think about the safety of themselves and their child than more elusive concepts such as freedom. And women are, this is not all women, because there are definitely differences, but a lot more women are willing to be comfortable slaves rather than uncomfortable free. And as such, it is easier for a man to come in and use his greatest strength and force a woman to become a slave, because she's more likely to be willing to accept it than it is for a woman to do the same with a man. But that doesn't mean that there is not a lot of men too who would be willing to be slaves if somebody pointed a weapon at them. Look at, for example, ancient history. There were a lot of male slaves, and in the Gore books as well there is a lot of male slaves. So yeah. So concept one is that in a society like Gore, where men makes most of the rules, they can, technically speaking, change the rule that all women are slaves, like they more or less did in one of the cities. I cannot say which, because I don't want to spoil anything for those that might not have read the books, but yeah. Not completely, but not far off. They enslaved like 99% of the female population. There's also a reason for that. But yeah. But so that is what the lawgivers can do there. And women have very little protection. And a lot more women than men will then choose to accept that, and that's the second reason. Of course, this doesn't apply to all women. It is mentioned in the books that a lot of places, when an invading army takes over a city-state, the free women are given a choice to be decapitated or accept slavery, and a lot of free women do accept decapitation instead of slavery. And then no man gave them their freedom. And yeah, the third concept here is that how much power a free companion or a woman's father and so on have in the society in the Gore books over her life. Now this is not complete, but it's clear that women do have a lot less rank in society, and a woman's father can marry her off. No, she has the right to end a free companionship if she wants, but it's very unlikely that she will. So, yeah, but that isn't directly slavery, because while the man has a lot of say of a woman, it isn't complete. So, yeah. concept of this is that in a society where men rule, it is easy for men then to set up laws that makes it easier to enslave women. This, however, does not mean that women generally are only free if men allow it. Now, I'm talking with quite a few Goreans who say that, for example, the women's liberation and women gaining the right to vote, there was just men giving it to them. Bullshit. Yes, a man signed the law, for example, in the United States. A man signed the law that gave women the right to vote. But the women fought for it like hell before that happened. So, yeah. But let's move a little bit past freedom and women and talk about freedom in general. So what is freedom? Many see freedom as sort of a privileged state. But really that's not freedom. Freedom is basically doing what you yourself want of your own free will, guided by your morality and what you think is right. Now, like it says in the Gore books, the swords of others will stop you, which means that if what you think is right is to murder all blue-haired old grandmothers, then the police will come and stop you. But freedom is acting of your own free will. Now, what is slavery? Slavery is when somebody else controls your actions. Slavery doesn't have anything to do with comfort. You can be an extremely comfortable slave. You can live in luxury and be a slave. And when do you lose your freedom? Do you lose your freedom when somebody bigger and stronger than you stops you from doing exactly what you want? No. You become a slave when you accept yourself as a slave. Meaning that if I, who am a pretty big and strong woman, were to find someone, sit on them and force them to do what I wanted, they wouldn't be slaves. Not if they actually fought back. Not if they are... Because fighting back isn't about winning, it is about the actual fighting. When someone stands up to a bully, for example, it doesn't really matter if they win. If they get their asses handed to them, of course it matters, but their freedom is dependent on that actually standing up to. Which means that if somebody comes and say you will either be a slave or you will die, if you say I will rather die than be a slave, then you are not a slave. If they then don't kill you but throw you in a jail, you're not a slave, you're a captive. And I also think there's one section in the books where Tarl gets taken prisoner and is sent to a mine, and I think it happens several times that he gets enslaved. It's the Gore books, everybody gets enslaved. But he of course escapes. And it is much debated among Goreans because at one point then Tarl yields to save his life. And he said, but that's unmanly. Is it? Basically he stays a slave like 5 femtoseconds before he managed to escape. I don't think that sort of yielding to then find a way to escape is losing your freedom. That is biding your time until you can escape. Of course, it depends what time are we talking about. If you agree to become a slave and you're a slave for years and years and years and years and years, that's something else, but I'm getting off topic. My point is this. To be truly free, you have to be willing to die for your freedom. Or anyone who is stronger than you can threaten to kill you to take your freedom away. And I don't think that it matters if you have boobs or a penis. The same qualifications for freedom still apply. If your freedom is dependent on somebody else, you are not free. You are privileged, perhaps. You are given a high place in society, perhaps, but you're not free. Freedom is the willingness to die for your beliefs, to die for your freedom. Now, you can say everybody has a breaking point. What if they're horribly, horribly, horribly tortured? What if something more important than their lives are threatened, like their children or their soul? Or, yeah, I think that everybody has a breaking point. I think that nobody is 100% safe from being made a slave. There's always, we all have something that is worth so much to us that we're willing to lose our freedom over it. But generally, if you are willing to die to remain free, you are free. And it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. The only thing that matters is that it's easier to kill a woman and force her to make the choice than it is to do the same for a man. So, yeah. I think that a lot of people who call themselves Gorean, especially those who have their entire Gorean lives are lived online, they don't stop and think about these concepts. You heard saying that is like the devil reads the Bible. Basically, what that means is that you just look at the quotes and it's oh, okay, but they don't stop and think, what does this mean? What is the point behind it? And that's a problem. So basically, I'm not, of course, all of what I'm saying here is my personal opinion. Excuse me. I am not an expert on all things Gorean. I have been a Gorean for 6 years or so, and there's a lot of people who has been into this a lot longer than me. So I can only give you my opinion. But as for my opinion, if you are going to follow a lifestyle based on a holy book, based on fiction books, like with the Gorean lifestyle or anything, you have to sit down and you have to try to understand what the various quotes means. You can't just quote it and say, because it says this, we have to take that completely literally. So yeah. And to sum it up, because I have to go, freedom is something that lives inside of you. And if you are willing to die for your freedom, you're free, no matter if you are a man or a woman. But if you are not willing to die for your freedom, if freedom is something that you see that others give to you, then you are a slave, no matter if you are a man or a woman. But I do think that a lot more men are willing to risk it all for their freedom than women. And that's not saying something negative about women, it's just that for us often comfort and the ability to raise our children in safety is more important than arbitrary concepts such as freedom. And that is ingrained in how we are made. Of course, that this doesn't apply to all women or all men. So, but that's a topic for another video. So yeah, I hope you have enjoyed this video and have a great day. Be well.